Recently we received episode 7 of season 2 of Helluva Boss, meaning we're exactly halfway through the second season. A year ago I did a video ranking every episode in season 1. Since the season will be twice as long as the previous, going from 8 episodes to 14, I thought that now would be a good time to go through each one, do a review, and then rank them on a tier list. I think some of you will relate to the fact that my opinions have changed a little since some of the episodes were made. Earlier scenes now make more sense since we've received context in later episodes. On the flip side, with hindsight, we may identify some problems we didn't see previously. So I think it'll be interesting to see what's changed and discuss which episodes in particular I like and dislike. The episodes will be ranked from A to F, A being my favourites, B being great but with a couple flaws, C being alright, D being poor, E being awful, and F being the worst thing ever. Did you know this about Honkai Star Rail? It's my favourite RPG game. No, forget that. It's my favourite game of all time and the sponsor of today's video. If you haven't heard of Honkai before, it's the newest RPG made by Hoyoverse, the creators of Genshin Impact, and it's here to blow your mind. Featuring state-of-the-art graphics, tons of characters, and it's completely free to play. Now is the perfect time to jump in. Let's talk about the new kids in the block, Huo and Argenti. Huo, the wind-type support character, isn't just your typical healer. She's great at multitasking by restoring health and dishing out attack energy buffs, keeping your team in the fight. And then there's Argenti, the physical type spear-wielding heartthrob. Those rose effects, magnificent. His appearance, equally magnificent. I mean, who knew you could look that good while dishing out AoE attacks? But there's more. In the newest version 1.5 update, there's a ton of new content, featuring a new map, new missions, and my personal favourite, 10 free pulls. Log in for 7 days to get these 10 free Star Rail special passes, and pray you'll get the character of your dreams. Huo or Argenti could be just one pull away. New players, use the link down below to download the game and support the channel. Enter my promo code on screen now for an additional 50 Stellar Jade. So what are you waiting for? Download the game, use my promo code, and strap in for the story of a lifetime. Special thanks to Honkai for sponsoring today's video. Up first is the Circus. When this episode came out, it kicked the hornet's nest, and I don't think discourse around the show has been the same since. A lot of it stems from the fact that the season 1 finale was delayed for so long, so fans were pretty frustrated by the wait, and the show lost a lot of steam as a result. So overall, this episode is pretty decent. It was centered around Blitz and Stolas, showcasing their childhood and how they first met. We got introduced to Stolas' father Paimon and Blitz's father Cash Buxo. This episode was set in the past, and we got a lot of character development, especially with young Fizz and Blitz. With the recent releases, I think this episode is actually even better. We've seen the deterioration and rekindling of Fizz and Blitz's friendship, and this episode shows the pair at their peak. It's a little sad seeing them so happy because you'll see all the trauma they go through later. The second half of the episode takes place in current day, and we get a new version of the scene from the pilot where Stella finds out about Stolas cheating on her. Speaking of Stella, I really do love her as a character. Not everyone will agree with me, but I think she's one of the best antagonists in the show. When this episode came out, a bunch of people said she was retconned, and I disagree completely. Past episodes clearly set up that Stella wasn't a good wife to Stolas or her daughter. With the benefit of hindsight, it's pretty clear to me that the people who said this didn't know what they were talking about and must have been asleep while watching season 1. Not every character needs to have a clear motivation, and sometimes it's nice to see someone as just straight up evil. It would be cool if Stella gets redeemed in the future, but I'm not holding out hope. The Circus features one song called Stolas Sings, and I think it's pretty good. It taps into the emotional elements of Stolas' character, and it was nice that they used his theme we've heard throughout the show as the instrumental. The writing, animation, and comedy were on point. I think with this episode, your mileage will vary, however. If you're big into Stolas and its lore, then you'll love it. Whereas if you just want to see IMP murder people and do their job, you'll dislike it. I'm not super into Stolits, but I can appreciate the importance of this episode in setting up future story beats and setting the stage for season 2 as a whole. I'm placing this one in B tier. It's a decent start to the season. Up next is episode 2, Seeing Stars. I was pretty critical of this episode when it dropped, and it hasn't really changed. The main issue with the episode is that Stolas and Blitz ignore the events of Aussies. This came off as a bit jarring to the average viewer, so as a result it wasn't received very well. We get some character building for Luna and Octavia, which was nice, but other than that, not much happened. The overall tone of the episode was dodgy, and it shifted around frequently, meaning you felt a bit confused. The songs weren't particularly interesting, and as I pointed out in my original review, the animation was a bit of a dice roll in terms of quality. This episode, combined with the previous, meant the show was off to a bit of a rocky start with its second season. I don't think this episode was necessarily bad, but compared to the rest, it's pretty weak. I'm putting it in D tier. Following on, we have episode 3, X's News. I actually did enjoy this one, and I thought it was way better than Seeing Stars. We had some fantastic visuals and plot elements, such as the introduction of Krim and Moxie's backstory. The Greed Ring is an awesome set piece, and I think this episode is one of the most visually stunning so far. We had the introduction of Chaz as another antagonist, who of course died at the end of the episode. To me, he came off as very similar to Blitz, but my main gripe with him was just the audio balancing. When he'd enter, his theme would play and it would divert your attention away from the scene. The main thing that dragged the episode down was the inconsistent writing and jokes. The tonal shifts were pretty jarring, like when you had the heartfelt backstory about Moxie's mother, and then immediately after we're brought back to Krim's house full of dildos. I understand the joke the team was going for, but for me personally, I don't think it landed and it took me out of the episode a little. There was some criticism on the role of Millie and Moxie, but I don't have an issue with them, and it's always cool to see the pair get some screen time. The songs in this episode weren't anything special. They're not necessarily bad, but not particularly memorable either. I'm putting episode 3 in C tier. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it didn't really blow my socks off either. Up next is episode 4, Western Energy. I think this one was decent enough as well. The elephant in the room was the change of Stryker's voice. It was cool to have Norman Reedus as Stryker's voice actor in season 1, but having him reprise his role would be quite difficult, especially with scheduling conflicts. This was a deal breaker for a lot of people, with them saying that Edward Bosco's voice was too different from Norman's. Personally, I don't really mind the change, and I think Ed did a great job. Your mileage will vary on this though, so I can understand why some people were frustrated with the change. The plot and story was solid. We got the introduction of Andrea Fizz, who was teased for a while, and I think he's a pretty compelling villain, even if he is just a carbon copy of Pilot Stolas. Animation was pretty good, and there was no complaints with the writing. Similarly to the last 2 episodes, this one suffered from a bit of jumping around with the B-plot. The secondary plot with Blitz and Luna took us out of the action with Stryker a bit, and to some, Luna not speaking was a letdown. The bit at the end with Blitz realising Stolas could get hurt was also confusing and was seen as a plot hole too many. The Ballad of Stryker was a pretty cool song as well. So overall, this episode was pretty decent. It did have a couple of problems, but not enough to pull it down. I'm putting this one in B tier. Now, on to episode 5, Unhappy Campers. Some might disagree with me, but I actually thought this one was pretty good. The overall plot and premise, while a little confusing, was good fun, and it was nice to see Moxie and Millie be the centre of focus again. Some people call this episode a character assassination of Moxie, and frankly, I don't agree. Some of his decisions were a bit odd and out of character, but by the end of the episode, it was nice to see him and Millie work things out. I genuinely love Moxie as a character, and it was a nice change of pace to see him take charge during a mission instead of Blitz. We got the introduction of Barbie Wire, and I thought she was cool, but in my opinion, she didn't get enough screen time. She's another character that's been teased for a while, so we only got a short snippet of her towards the end. We'd likely get more scenes from her in the future, but I think she could have had a bit more of a presence in this one. The songs again were alright, but not particularly memorable. The comedy and writing was decent enough, but I don't think there was any major tonal issues, which was good to see. The entire episode seemed pretty focused, and I think it was a step in the right direction. This one is going in B tier. On to episode 6, and this one knocked the ball out of the park. It feels like every episode with Fizz Azie is peak, and this one continues that trend. Oops basically ticked every box of what a good episode of the show is. It's not rushed and takes time to go through the plot points. It builds upon previous lore while also establishing content for the future. It has the right balance of jokes, heartfelt moments, and romance. I hope I don't get killed for this, but Fizz and Azie are my favourite couple in the show. The two characters just bounce off each other so well, and I prefer them over Stolas and Blitz. I do like Stolas, but I just love Fizz and Azie's interactions, like at the start and the end when they hug. We saw the return of Krim and Stryker. They weren't as threatening as I'd like them to be, but the episode was mainly about answering why Fizz and Blitz fell out, and they definitely answered that plot point. The friendship between Fizz and Blitz has been hinted at for ages, and it was so satisfying to find out what went down. It really emphasised that although these characters have been through a lot of trauma, they're able to rely on the friendship of others to carry on and better themselves, which was really sweet. The jokes and humour were well put together, and Fizz's song, Look at This, was fantastic. Like with the last episode, there was no plot holes or tonal inconsistencies. Everything flowed well, and the 27-minute runtime gave plenty of time to flesh out the characters and provide a satisfying conclusion. This episode was a banger and an easy A tier. And last but definitely not least, we have the episode 7, Mammon's magnificent mid-season special. This episode is the longest yet, sitting at 30 minutes, and this one was cooked to perfection. We had the long-awaited reveal of Mammon, and the team were right to hype him up. Michael Cusack nailed the role and created my favourite villain in the show. Like with the previous episode, it was heavily focused on Fizz, Azie and Blitz, with plenty of character development for them all. The comedy was on point, featuring plenty of jokes that landed perfectly. The songs were absolute bangers. The This episode easily had the best songs of the season so far. 2 Minutes Notice and Glitz and Glam's song are the best yet. The overall plot and pacing was superb. The episode didn't feel too fast or too slow. It was interesting seeing the toxic relationship Mammon had with Fizz, and it made his departure at the end even better. Like with Oops, it built upon previous plot points that were set up a while ago, while setting up for future episodes. I can't wait to see the return of Mammon and Glitz and Glam. My only complaint is that the audio balancing was a little off for Fizz and Ozzy's duet. Other than that, this episode was a masterpiece and easily the best episode of the season so far. It's an easy A tier. To finish things off, I'm going to review episode 8 Queen Bee, since it was still in copyright limbo back when I made my first season review a year ago. This episode was a change of pace and instead focused on Luna and Blitz. I really enjoyed this one. Although this episode wasn't super important to the lore, it was a nice little finale for season 1 and also introduced another sin, being Beelzebub. She's an awesome character and it was awesome hearing Kesha voice her. It's extremely unfortunate that the episode was delayed as long as it was, but I think it was worth the wait. It made me appreciate the episode a lot more and I was able to examine all the fine details and little Easter eggs, which is something I probably would have missed if this came out in season 1. This episode I think has the best songs in the entire series, closely followed by Mammon's episode. Cotton Candy, although a little repetitive, is extremely catchy. Monsters Ball is a banger and I really hope we get the full version of it eventually. If you didn't know, originally Cotton Candy was voiced by Kesha, but they had to recreate it with Rochelle Diamante as her replacement. It would have been cool to see Kesha's version, but I'm happy we got it at all. Some people say this episode didn't really develop Luna, but I disagree. It was interesting to see her step outside of her comfort zone and meet new people. As far as complaints go, I don't really have any. This episode was wonderful and a lovely little conclusion to season 1. Queen Bee is an easy A tier in my books. So there you have it, that's the first half of season 2 ranked. Although the season was off to a bit of a rocky start, they completely pulled it back with the last few episodes, and I'm extremely excited for the future. One thing I noticed is that with Helluva Boss, the first couple episodes tend to be a bit mixed, but they're always fantastic towards the end. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues with season 2. Perhaps the next couple episodes will be alright, but then towards the end of the season we'll have some bangers. I do think the season gets a little more hate than it deserves though. I've seen people say that some of the earlier episodes, such as the pilot, are better than season 2, and I disagree completely. I've watched these episodes back countless times while editing videos, and an episode like Murder Family doesn't hold a candle against Mammon's episode or Oops. The show has steadily improved in comedy, music and animation style. I think the only aspect that needs to be worked on is the story. It could benefit if it was a bit more focused and some of the consistency in terms of tone needs ironed out. These aren't big problems though and can definitely be resolved as time goes on. So that's everything I wanted to discuss covered. I could have went into detail a bit more, but I don't want the video to be an hour long and I feel like I covered the main points in each episode. If you agree with my takes or disagree and have some of your own, I'd love for you to leave them in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching. Thank you.